Pardon me, boy. Is this the Transylvania station?
Yeah, track 29. Oh, can I give you a shine?
It was a very easy production and a lot of fun. We had lots of laughs while we were making it.
Would you like to have a roll in the hay? Roll in the hay.
It was wonderfully conceived, and it was brilliantly written, and it was executed, I think, in a way that's you don't see anymore.
Two nasty-looking switches over here, but I'm not going to be the first.
Dim your eyes!
Too late.
The original was a classic, and what Mel did was another classic. These gags were really tough to get them to work, and Mel used secretaries from the lot to get these gags to work.
Lies, do you hear me? Give my creation lies!
To remember being 9 years old and seeing all this equipment and electrical things going off all over in circles and bangs, and then I'm the doctor, and it's all happening again. A yellow legal pad and a blue felt pen, and I wrote down on top, Young Frankenstein. I didn't know what it meant then. And I went upstairs just to muse for a little while, and for maybe half an hour, I put down what I thought might happen to me if I were the great-grandson of Beaufort von Frankenstein. That's Frankenstein. And I asked myself then, why did you say young Frankenstein? And I think it was because I was influenced by young Edison that I saw as a little boy. Why Frankenstein? Because when I was a little boy, I was scared to death of Frankenstein movies. The original one, and Bride of Frankenstein. I was influenced by Ghost of Frankenstein and Son of Frankenstein, and a little bit of Return of Frankenstein. But mostly, the biggest one was The Bride of Frankenstein. I knew it was fertile ground to do a satire, but I also wanted to have it end my way and not the way it did in the movie. And, originally when I wrote it, I had Dr. Frankenstein being thrown off the precipice and the monster and my fiancée getting together. About 3 months later, my new agent, Mike Medavoy, he said, how about a film with you and Marty Feldman and Peter Boyle? I said, that's great. What made you think of that? He said, because I now represent you and Marty and Peter. I said, well, with a wonderful artistic basis like that, it can't go wrong. And I said, actually, I do have something that might be right. He said, send it to me. I said, give me a little time. I want to work on it. And I took 2 days, and I wrote out 4 pages. The Transylvania station scene where I meet Marty is just about verbatim the way it is in the film now.
Dr. Frankenstein.
2 days later, he calls up, said, terrific, terrific. Maybe we can get Mel Brooks to direct this. I said, I don't think Mel will direct anything that he didn't conceive of. But if you can, it would be wonderful. The next day, Mel calls and says, what are you getting me into? I said, nothing that you don't want to get into. I don't know. I was
having lunch with an agent, Mike Medavoy, at the time, and he told me that he received a treatment from a client of his, Gene Wilder, on a spoof on Frankenstein. And he said, would you like to see it? I went up to his office, I read it, it was only like 12 pages, and loved it. We called Gene. We agreed on the type of movie that he was going to write and said he would like to have Mel Brooks co-write it.
He was preparing Blazing Saddles. It hadn't come out yet. So when they offered him Young Frankenstein, and I would be doing the writing and he would supervise, it was very tempting, and he said yes. And Columbia had this thing that the budget was $2,250,000, and they said $1,750,000 and not a penny more. And Mel said to them on one historic day, "You guys are crackerjacks. You're right down to the penny. So I guess we have to compromise and you have to compromise, so let's meet at $2 million."
Well, the budget came in and it was 2.3, and Mel said, "I can't make it for any less than 2.3. And I said, "Fine, then let's look elsewhere. Columbia doesn't want to do it." And I gave it to a friend of mine who had been starting at 20th Century Fox, Alan Ladd Jr., and he said, "Great, we'll make this movie." And so I shifted the project from Columbia to Fox.
Mel and I met in my apartment in New York for about 2 hours and 45 minutes on this first day to do with Young Frankenstein. And the first hour was spent with how to make the coffee, what kind of coffee, what to have with the coffee. He had brought a bag of Schnecken, which figures prominently later on in Young Frankenstein in the script. We talked about everything but the script. And after we'd had our talk about all little nothings, which was sort of Mel's way of working, to so slowly creep up on whatever you're going to do that's important, we started talking about the script from A to Z, wild things, things that I knew in my heart weren't going to be in, but to touch all the bases.
You know, it was Gene's idea, and once he came up and worked with Gene on the script, he took it over, Mel. And it was a blessing because he's very funny, he's very talented. It allowed us to get the cast that we wanted, it allowed us to get the extra money that we needed to pull this off, his whole vision.
He taught me the greatest screenwriting lesson that I ever had, which was that the first draft is just a concept, and then you have to take a sledgehammer and just knock the pillars as hard as you can. If they hold up, you keep it in. And if they start to crumble, you have to rewrite, because the structure is everything. The blind man pours soup into the monster's soup bowl in The Bride of Frankenstein. I thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if he misses and hits the crotch?
Sometimes in our preoccupation with worldly matters,
There was almost an equivalent for each thing that happens. Food, good. Friend, good. It wasn't that we were doing a burlesque. It wasn't the Three Stooges. Except the soup came close to that, but it was still in control. And then the cigars and the thumb being lit.
don't inhale until the tip glows.
It was really a parody of that beautiful scene in The Bride of Frankenstein. I thought it would be a wonderful theatrical experience for the audience to see the monster and me dancing as a test of how far I had, as Dr. Frankenstein, brought the monster along towards sophistication. I thought Mel would burst into tears when he read it, especially Irving Berlin and Top Hat and Tails. And he says, "Are you crazy? What kind of a conceit is this? The audacity? You're going to have all of our work go down the drain with singing and dancing and putting on a show like we're doing some musical?" I was close to rage and tears. I argued the ins and outs of why it was not a conceit, but it was valid. I had turned from red to purple. And right in mid-sentence, Mel says, "Okay, it's in." And I didn't know if he was joking or not, and I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "It's in." Why did you put me through this? And he said, "I wasn't sure if it was right, brilliant and right, or terribly wrong. I didn't know. And I wanted to see how hard you'd fight for it. And I knew if you fought hard enough, it was right. And you did. So it's in. And it was never mentioned again.
I saw it as a possibility for some really great comedy casting. Gene had already had the idea of Peter Boyle for the monster, Marty Feldman for Igor, and Madeline Kahn. And Mel directing, since I had liked his previous films. I thought that we had the potential to make a very funny movie.
Madeline didn't want to play the lab assistant. She wanted to play the fiancée. I thought she must be nuts, because I thought the lab assistant was a much better part. Well, it was until Madeline put her own stamp on my fiancé.
Would you want me like this now? So soon before our wedding, so near we can almost touch it.
Yes!
Whoa! Oh, boy.
Then Terry Garr walked in and read with a German accent the lab assistant, and then that became really a major part. I thought it was a good part, but I didn't know it was going to be such a good part.
In other words, his veins, his feet, his hands, his organs would all have to be increased in size.
Exactly.
He would have an enormous Schwanzstücke.
The monster was great on paper, but we didn't know if it would work. Till Peter came in. I don't know how many people have seen Peter in real life, but he is so childlike, so innocent. You know, he doesn't say words for about an hour and 25, 30 minutes. But he started doing his... Catching butterflies. That was his idea, to catch butterflies. It brought the part to life. I think that this cast was blessed in a way, I don't say blessed by God, but blessed by something, because everyone found themselves. Frau Blucher was a good part, a crazy lady, but when Cloris Leachman brought the reality to it, she was tutti frutti.
I am Frau Blucher.
I wanted the audience to know that even though they don't know why yet, the horses know that this is a terrifying woman, and God knows what she does to them when no one's watching.
Marty was just the sweetest man. He was just a lovely, cooperative, funny, talented comedy genius. What he brought was his interpretation of those old Frankenstein, Dracula, monster movies, and his interpretation of Igor.
No, it's pronounced Igor.
But they told me it was Igor.
Well, they were wrong then, weren't they?
For me, he is probably the heart and soul of the film.
Abby someone. Abby someone. Abby who? Abby normal.
The bizarre world that we all entered into when we walked onto that set was epitomized by Marty Feldman.
I ain't got no body, and nobody cares for me.
Now, Gene Hackman asked me privately, because I knew him, is there some little part that I could play? He meant like the second officer or something, you know, just to walk through, say a line, and go out. And I said, well, I'll talk to Mel, we'll see. We were in pre-production then. I talked to Mel about it. We both agreed that there was only one part, and that was the blind man.
You see how heaven plans. Me, a poor blind man, and you a mute. An incredibly big mute.
When Gene Hackman's name came up, you heard people say, oh, I knew it was Gene Hackman, or I didn't know who it was. It was, to me, that was a real surprise that people did not realize who it was during the show, and then afterwards they got a big laugh on the roll-up knowing who it was, heightened that bit.
Kenny Mars brought an insanity to Inspector Kemp that had to be listened to, adjusted to, as far as the script was concerned.
We had better confirm the fact that young Frankenstein is indeed following in his grandfather's footsteps. What?
following in his grandfather's footsteps, footsteps, footsteps!
My thought was that it should begin in black and white to replicate the original original Frankenstein, but that we could segue into color when it became the modern day or the young Frankenstein.
Doing it in black and white was a big thing because no studios around that time were making films in black and white. In fact, we were pressured to make it in color because they said they wouldn't buy black and white films in Europe.
20th Century Fox, who was releasing the picture, weren't very happy about it. They wanted it to be shot in color because they were thinking of the sale to television. And Mel was very adamant about the fact that if they were going to do it in color, he wasn't going to direct it.
But we stuck by our guns and we said, no, this is how we want to make it. This is the vision behind the film. And they said, okay, go ahead.
As I viewed the dailies, though, the first couple of weeks, I realized that Mel was really right. There was a quality of the black and white that really supported the story. And he was 100% correct in doing it. Mel and Gene both had me look at the original Frankenstein and the Bride of Frankenstein. And I was going to replicate this look for them. And that's what I started to do until after about the first week and a half, Mel took me, after the dailies, he said, stay a minute, I want to talk to you. And he said, you know, what did you think of the dailies? I said, well, I thought they would look pretty fine. I said, there were one or two shots that maybe could have been printed a little darker. He said, well, it's not what we want at all. And I was shocked, and I was wondering, what are you saying? He said, we want to satirize that look. We really want it to be more than the original. And I said, well, you never told me that. And fortunately, Gene was there, Gene Wilder was there, and he said, Mel, you know, he's right. We never spoke to him about we wanted to do more. We wanted to satirize the look. He said, he's replicating the look, but we want it to be more so. So I told him, I said, well, we were doing night photography then. I said, I'll try several things tonight and see if you like it better. And I did several things, and the dailies would come up, and the first scene comes on, he said, that's more like it. And then another couple came on, and I changed things a little bit. Oh, that's even better. And finally, we came to an understanding. The other thing I did was to have the lab process the film in a specific way that supported the look that I wanted. And this was a problem because at this particular point in time, the labs hadn't done any black and white films for some time, 6 or 8 years. Mel, being the comedic director that he was, and having worked in comedy all his career, I guess, at that time, was that he felt comedy should be bright. On the other hand, I had to give the picture, as far as I was concerned, I had to give a picture of a look that somewhat replicated the original Frankenstein, but still would be adaptable to comedy. And what I had realized was if I could set up in the audience's mind the environment as being a very moody environment, and then accommodate Mel by making sure the close-ups, which really punched up the jokes and whatnot, make them lighter and so you could really see the eyes anyway, but not so that it would be contrasty. The audience accepts the fact they're now in a moody situation, in a dark, gloomy castle. But when we get in closer, that's just set in their mind, and now they would just see they would see the jokes now.
There. Now I've touched it. Happy?
I guess must have been about 3 weeks later, Mel said to me, he said, you know, I'm glad I didn't fire you 3 weeks ago. And I felt like saying, you should be lucky I didn't leave the picture. I remember going along with Mel on a scouting trip, and we went to Strickfaden's garage, and all the equipment was sitting on there from the original Frankenstein, and I just looked at this in awe and wonder and amazement. And he came on the set whenever we were doing the lab. He was there all the time, and not only did he bring his old equipment and keep it running properly, but he was designing new things at the same time.
You know, I had a lot of sense memories from having seen it in the original films when I was a kid. And I wondered what would happen when I was actually playing with it as the doctor. And to see it in the lab, it was hard not to smile.
Dale Hennessy put up beautiful sets. They were some of the most beautiful sets I ever worked on.
In the best of worlds, the production designer is a part of the script, if they can bring the script to life. But it was as if he was doing his part in writing the script, because some of the scenes were actually better because of his concept of what it looked like. It was a mammoth set. When you walked in, the ceilings were like 30 feet high. It was just huge, and everything was solid.
We shot it on the lot at Fox. We used, for the exteriors, we used the back lot of MGM, and for Transylvania Station and a number of other scenes.
The bedrooms were fantastic. The revolving bookcases.
Hand me that candle, will you? Put the candle back.
And what Jerry Hirschfeld did in the lighting of Dale Hennessy's sets was it was like another writer working on it.
Oh, my dearest love, I'll count the hours that you're away.
Oh, darling, so will I.
Not on the lips.
Walking down that staircase after having found the secret passageway. It was pretty simple, just spraying cobwebs all over the place, but the way it was lit, and I had a candle with a light in it, shining for my face and Terry's face, and it was spooky.